Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of CERP Podcasts. In today's episode, we'll be featuring one of the oldest and largest research projects at CERP, the Women's Mobility Project. The project aims to quantify the impact of social norms on women's participation in the public sphere, including in the labor force, and test whether basic interventions can expand the scope of opportunities available to women. My name is Alieha Shahid. I'm the Program Manager for the Women's Mobility Project at CERP, and I'll be moderating this discussion today. Joining me today are Dr. Kate Vyborny and Syed Uzair Junaid. Uzair, like myself, is also the Program Manager for the project and will be talking to us today about the sorts of challenges associated with implementing a research project of this scale and nature. Kate is the Principal Investigator for the Women's Mobility Program and is also the Associate Director of DevLab at Duke. Uzair and Kate, thank you so much for taking out time for today's episode of CERP Podcasts. Kate and Uzair, the three of us have been working on this project for around 5 years now. I remember that when the project started out, we were doing one RCT that aimed to measure the impact of transport on gender-related outcomes. In particular, we were focused on studying female labor force participation and the impact of transport on that. That's still something we're studying even now, but the scale and scope of it, and now we're doing multiple different studies related to gender and the labor economy under the banner of the Women's Mobility Program. So Kate, my first question is directed towards you. I know that this expansion of the project and scope has largely been, which is a measurement tool, so to speak, that we came up with for data collection for the original transport RCT. Can you speak to us today about the Job Talash platform and how it's enabled the evolution of the program? And what are the sorts of new experiments that we're doing using data collected from this platform?
So thank you so much, Alieha, and thanks to CERP for doing this podcast series. As Alieha, as you said, we did start the program with one primary research interest in mind some years back, which is to understand to what extent safe movement around the city is a constraint on women's labor force participation. So there's a lot of descriptive evidence that kind of points in that direction, but relatively limited evidence that would really allow us to pinpoint and say if women could move around more safely, that would give them better access. So the original idea was to offer safe transport to a treatment group as part of a pilot in a randomized control trial, whether or not women are more likely to work as part of a survey, as sort of a standard survey approach. But what we realized is there were a number of things that made that challenging, and in particular, it was difficult to know whether a given person would find, or she would know where is the location of a job opportunity and does the transport take her there or not. So there was a lot of kind of noise that would make it difficult to see the impact of the transport treatment on women's labor force participation decisions. So what we decided to do instead was to measure more directly by information about job opportunities, and that evolved into a job search that we run as part of a program called Job Talash. So in that service, we match employers who are interested in hiring with candidates who have the qualifications for the jobs that are posted, and then we are forwarding the CVs for those candidates to the employers. So that means that we're generating a lot of administrative data, which tells directly for each person at each job opportunity they saw, did they decide to apply to that job or not? And so we used to look at the impact of the transfer on men's and women's decisions to apply to jobs. But we also realized since setting up this whole system that this provides us a lot of opportunity to do further investigation on a range of different labor market issues related to the causes of unemployment and the reasons why employers and candidates primarily search through their social network as opposed to on a broader labor market, and what kind of implications that has for economic growth and for equality of opportunity. So we now have several different research projects that investigate those issues. So one example, I just mentioned a second ago about the fact that in the survey data from our setting, but also from many other contexts, that most employers don't search by posting an ad in the newspaper or on the internet. They're most likely to search for candidates by just asking around in their social network. There could be a lot of different reasons for that, and there is kind of a body of research that investigates why that's the case. But one of many reasons for it could be the fact that employers don't know when they get a candidate that's unknown to them, that's outside of their social network. They don't know whether that candidate is really qualified as he or she says. So they would like to know about reviews from supervisors. They would like to get that kind of information. They get it right now in the status quo through their social network, through their contacts, the kind of an informed opinion about the candidate's ability. And so what we're doing as part of like an additional study through JobTelash is to test whether giving references, doing reference checking on candidates leads to, it allows employers to hire more through our platform and potentially substitute away from just hiring through their social network. And that could be really important for women, because women generally have a more limited network of professional contacts than that that a lot of the women that they know have might not be working. So prevention like this could potentially help to reduce the kind of break open access to employment that's currently kind of locked up in an old boys network. So that's one of the projects that we're working on currently, that's currently underway. But as I said, there's several different ones that are investigating different aspects of the labor market and opportunities in Lahore.
Thank you so much, Kate. That was a very comprehensive explanation, not just of the program, but also the very exciting new directions it's taking. So I know that the research is currently underway, and it is expected to continue sometime, over the next year and a half. So I mean, I'm sure the findings aren't published yet, and they're at a very preliminary stage. But having said that, are there any 2 or 3 insights or findings from this particular project that you've come across over the course of these last few years that really stand out for you and you'd maybe like to share with us today?
Sure. So the project on safe mobility is the first project that we initiated, as we discussed earlier. And so that's the project that has kind of advanced the furthest in terms of seeing results. We are still working on it, and so we don't have a paper out yet, but we hope to soon. So what we've seen in some of the preliminary results is that women do indeed respond to an offer of safe transport. The offer of safe transport can increase their application rates very substantially, and that we don't see a kind of a similar response among men, which makes sense and is kind of in line with, I think, what a lot of Banis and people who live here in Lahore have experienced directly, that that this of security in getting to and from work is something that affects women a lot and affects men much less so, given social norms that constrain women's movement, as well as reduce the acceptability of for women to, say, move around on a motorbike or move solo in a room. So we're currently trying to understand more about how that affects kind of the scope of job opportunities that they apply to, as well as to separate out different aspects of this, how much of this is related to safety versus how much of this is related to norms that say that a woman shouldn't be seen to be moving around solo due to the perceptions about her, how that reflects on her character. So that work is still ongoing, but I think what we've seen so far does suggest that this aspect of safe mobility is something that's very important for women in terms of accessing job opportunities.
That sounds really interesting, Kate. Thank you for that answer. Uzair, my next question is for you. You and I have both been involved in the day-to-day implementation of the project, and I know it's come with a lot of roadblocks and challenges. And personally, for me, one of the biggest challenges that I've witnessed during my time at the project is with regards to getting response rates up. And this has been on the side of both Job Talash subscribers, but also on the side of firms. For instance, simple problems like getting the candidates to show up to scheduled interviews, or getting firms to provide candidate feedback. So that's been pretty tough. Can you talk to us a little bit about what your experience has been of these challenges, and how the project is trying to sort of cope with these issues?
Thank you, Alieha, and thank you, sir, for doing this podcast. So you're right, Alieha, that there have been a lot of challenges, and I think some of them stem from the fact that we're not only are we looking at trying to study the impact of certain interventions, but we're also implementing those interventions ourselves. And so it's a double-edged sword. It helps us understand the entire process in a great way, in a lot more detail. But at the same time, we also have to then think about the hurdles that we face during that implementation. So you rightly pointed out that one major thing that we saw during the course of our research was that job seekers would not show up to interviews. That has happened, I think, to some extent. Everyone expects this to happen in any labor market, but maybe uh, it wasn't as we weren't expecting it to be so prevalent. So we would get feedback from employers that even after we facilitated people looking for jobs and we match them to employers, they would still say that job seekers don't show up for interviews. And so I would say that this is both an insight as well as a challenge for us. It's an insight because we weren't expecting this to be that big of a problem, and I guess the expectation was that people would just know that they would, once they confirm their interest in a job, they would show up if the employer called them. And it's a challenge because if this is happening, and if this has happened, it's very prevalent, then this also has an impact on our research, because it's important for our research to also understand what happens after uh, an employer and a job seeker is matched. So whether or not the employer interviews that person, how is that person rated, whether or not the person is shortlisted in the first place, eventually whether the person actually gets a job or not. So I think in the project we've been good at finding lemons and making lemonade overall. So what we try to do is to study this. Why is this happening? So we have, as you know, we have a few new experiments that are geared towards understanding exactly that. What happens after the employers are told about candidates who are interested in that job? And so, although we already are capturing some data, and we have been doing that for some time by getting feedback from employers about what they thought about the candidates. But these additional experiments enable us to develop a deeper understanding of the entire process. And so now we facilitate, in certain experiments, we facilitate those candidates every step of the way. So showing up to interviews, seeing how the interviews went. This also involves the aspect of exploring whether transport to interviews, whether that's an issue for people or not. So that's something that we are exploring as part of this.
Thank you so much, Uzair, for your answer. And I completely agree with you. Starting out with this project, when we started getting results from the sort of data collection we were doing, I was also very surprised about the sort of low response rates, especially in terms of people showing up for interviews, because intuitively that's something that you expect people would be very eager to do, or would be really proactive in accomplishing. But uh, I think the biggest learning from me on this project has been how much of a nudge people require at each step of the job application process. This holds true in terms of they have, when we provide them a job ad and them actually like taking the effort to call us and register interested in that job ad, to the stage where they have been invited to an interview, and them showing this sort of inertia to actually make it to the interview. But I mean, exciting times coming up, because we're now doing further RCTs within this RCT to understand why that's happening. So for instance, if women are not showing up to scheduled interviews, could that maybe be because, we circle back to the original argument, could that be because they have transport issues? And so we're trying to test out that if we provide transport to women to be able to get to these interviews, would that make a difference? And similarly, the same with like people applying for job ads. We're trying to study whether it makes a difference, whether we sort of nudge them into applying by constantly sort of pestering them and getting back to them, okay, this is the job ad, do you want to apply? Or whether you just sort of leave it to them to call you and apply. So I think it's the project is going in a lot of exciting directions, and thank you for taking out the time to talk about it.